explain real quickly a little bit about extension. And my daughter and my goddaughter are going to use out some free goodies I have for you guys. So Extentium is nationwide. Our office is in California, but we all work remotely, pretty much for the most part. We do have a couple of staff there. Does anybody know what SiteCore is or have heard of SiteCore? Okay. So it's a web CMS. It has scalable campaign management, analytics, testing, optimization, omnichannel delivery, personalization. It integrates with Salesforce and other CRM. So our company, we primarily focus on SiteCore, but we do other things. UX design, managed services in the cloud. I'm kind of proud of this. I was on a team that actually worked on this project. And Dime Brands is IHOP and Applebee's. And so we got an award, a SiteCore award last year for best return on investment. That was exciting. So today, I'm going to be talking about Sass. I'm going to talk about what it is, what are the advantages, how you install it, some of the things that it does, like nesting, mixins, functions, and operations. And then we're going to create like a little style sheet so you can see it in action. So Sass stands for Practically Awesome Style Sheet. It lets you basically use features that don't exist in CSS right now, and then save them into a normal CSS file using a compiler or a preprocessor, so you can use that term. It uses the SCSS file extension. Some of the advantages are it helps you to basically organize your style sheet so that it's easier to understand and to maintain. Your code is more organized, and it helps you to work quickly. Like, quite honestly, I don't even remember how to write real CSS anymore because Sass has basically taken over my life. So it's a struggle for me to have to write real CSS. So to install it, you can install it on a Windows, Mac, or Linux machine. I have some instructions here. I think I'm just gonna send out my presentation. There's links in here that you can click to, but it's pretty easy to search the stuff on the web. You can use package managers like npm, brew. Basic rules are you're never gonna edit your CSS files. You're always using a preprocessor to compile your Sass into CSS. You don't want to nest more than 4 selectors deep, and I'll show you what that is when we go over nesting. You can use gulp to watch for your changes in your Sass files, and then when you save it, it'll automatically compile. I use Visual Studio, and so there is web compiler. It's like a plugin that goes with Visual Studio. It does it for you automatically. And then there's some tools out there. I tried Live Reload, and I have a Windows machine, and it did not work well for me. But I think it works better on the Mac. But some of these other ones I haven't tried because I haven't had to, but there's a couple of tools out there for other people to try. So one of the things I want to start with would be variables. So to declare a variable in Sass, you use the $ and followed by the name of the variable. So red, then here's the value for that. And then you can put that value as the variable with your property. So now your H1 tag is going to be blue. Your paragraph colors of your text would be red. So here's a little terminology, just so we all know we're talking about the same thing. So the module class is your selector. Then the declaration would be your property and your value. And then the rule set is that whole piece together. So when I show you nesting, we're looking at this area is a rule set. It's 2 rule sets, one for the A tag and one for the span. So the point is, instead of writing all of this out in CSS, and you're repeating your background and your color values in each one of these rule sets, you can combine it and put your selector that is kind of like a container selector, and then you have your background and your color, and then you can specify the things that are different between your A tag and your span. So I did a little demo so you can kind of see what this is. So your container, has, oh, you know, that's not it. Oh, that's my next slide. I'm going to talk about pseudo-classes using the ampersand. So you can use the ampersand to change your selectors. So say we have 2 divs, and I'm just going to show my code. Can everybody see this, or is it too small?
No, too small for me.
Too small, okay. Okay. So we have 2 divs. Each of them has a menu class, but they're just a little different because they also have this container class. Now I could have also put the menu class around both these divs, but I digress. So in order to use the ampersand, I have put in here the container class has a width of 100. The menu class has a width. Activity bar has a width of 50. So you can see here, even though they look like they're different declarations, you have 100% width here and 50% here, but they also share the menu class. The menu class gives them the properties of the background, the height, the color of the text. I use Flex a lot. The font size and the margin, and then the container itself has just the width, and the activity bar has the width. And then it compiles into this CSS. So normally you would be writing all of this to make that happen. It makes the biggest difference when you have a huge style sheet and you're working with lots of different people, because you can separate everything into partials, and I'll get to that. So partials are smaller files that it can be imported into Sass files. They usually have a leading underscore. That's the best practice. You can name it whatever you want, but the best practice is to have a leading underscore. And then you use the import directive to bring those files into your current file. So what I've done here, I created a file called mixins, and I've imported it to the top of my styles SCSS file, Sass file. So a mixin allows us to make groups of CSS declarations that we want to reuse for our website. We can pass values such as arguments, values as arguments that allows your mixin to be more flexible. So I wanted to give an example of what that would look like. So the mixin I have here is basically giving me, adding in the, what do you call these? Like cross-browser properties that would control this flex direction. You put the column here. This is my mixing here. You use the include directive. And I'm gonna recompile, and then you can see in the CSS that it's added all of this. That was my mixing. So you've taken 5 lines and we've taken 1 and made 5 lines of code, of CSS. Another way to do that is an extend, but you can do the same thing, but for extend, you don't have any arguments that are passed. So in this example, I've created a variable called button and assigned a height and width to it, well, BTN. And then I have another selector button where I bring in this variable. And I can show an example of that as well. So right now I'm going to delete all of this code. It exists in this button variable here. Uncomment this. I'm compiling. You can see nothing's changed. Now in your button, your button still has all those same values. Oh, here it is. So now your button has all the values that it was supposed to have from what I deleted and moved over to my mixin file. Some of the other things you can do is operators. Oops. You can perform calculations. You can access standard math functions like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And then you can combine them to make complex functions. One of my examples was just the basic width. I don't find I use those a whole lot. So I'm gonna comment out my 100%. And now you can see okay, so something is not working. Let's do some troubleshooting. Still has I think my compiler is not working right now. But that's pretty much what you can do with Sass. Here's some other resources I have at the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want me to do? Go ahead.
I work for a small company, so how much does Sass cost?
It is free. It is open source. It's just something you download off the net and add to your machine. And then you're basically creating CSS files, and you just upload them to the server with your project.
The people who created it are still incredibly active in the community, which is really cool. You can like follow them on Twitter, and they're always posting new updates and things like that. Sorry.
No, thank you. Go ahead.
It's cool.
So the difference between mix-ins and extend is just that you can do inputs in mix-ins?
You can, yes, and mix-ins you can pass arguments, and extend you cannot. And I will admit, I do not use extend a whole lot. I pretty much use mix-ins, but I think extend, mix-ins they repeat your CSS more. So in a larger project, it's probably a best practice to use. If you're not gonna pass any arguments, just use an extend, because it only gets compiled once.
Can you show that mix-in example once?
Yeah.
I mean, how it passes arguments, how it passes arguments, do you have?
Sure. Okay, let me get my compiler. So look at this. But
Oh.
here's the variable that you're going to pass is direction. So here you do your include directive. Here's the variable, and here's the variable column. So this itself I could remove completely because it's already included in the mix-in.
So go back to the mix, the Sass file.
This one. Is there any other questions? Was that enough for what you wanted to see? Okay.
Do you know of some other popular software applications that are similar to Sass?
There's another one called Less. That's pretty much the same. I use that at another company. I really think it's just whoever's personal preference when they start the project, but they're very, very similar. Very similar. Is anybody using JSS yet?
JSS?
JSS.
What is that? CSS is
It is.
Hold on.
Yeah. I haven't used it. I was introduced to it. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay.
That sounds dirty.
Yeah, well,
I don't want to go CSS. Okay.
I mean, it's just, you're basically creating objects and assigning properties to that object. That's all it is.
All right, so you giving that talk next time?
That's on your list. Is there any other questions?
Do some demos. Show us live
Some
code.
more demo? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Live code? Okay, I will show you, I hope I won't get in trouble, but I doubt it, because I will show you Applebee's. Because I just want you to see how many Sass files we use in our project. It's ridiculous. If you can see this. So we use basically just Bootstrap grid in our IHOP project, and then we use a different Sass file for each one of our components that we've customized. So look at all of that. So Applebee's and IHOP are on the same code base. And then we also have a theming project that also has these basic components and the base level that they're styled. And it's all compiled into a CSS file. We have two for IHOP. A theme file. We have two theme files that have over almost 7,000 lines of CSS in them. Wow. And we have a team of probably 10 developers working with the CSS files.
So can you talk more about why it's helpful to use Sass versus just straight up CSS?
Yes.
Like in an enterprise setting when you're when you're dilly-dallying with like 7,000 lines of code?
So, one of the reasons why is if I make a change, okay, I'll just show you the site. So the site is basically broken up into components. And so the navigation itself is one component. So if I decide that I'm going to change this link to be blue or red, it's all of my CSS is contained in a class that's called C menu nav. And that way that navigation has its own Sass file. If I change the way this link looks, it's not gonna change every link on the site. And I can work on this independently of what other people are doing. So say somebody else is working on the footer has its own Sass file. So it's easier to do it that way than one CSS file that has to be all merged together and worked on at the same time. It compiles into the large CSS file. Does that answer the question? Like, I don't know, I just ramble sometimes.
What do you think I do when I'm up there?
I don't think I've done a presentation probably since I was in college, and that was like 20 years ago, so I'm not sure.
You're doing great. Well, I'm learning.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Would you mind showing us like what it looks like when you Google Chrome it? Okay, so let's say you want to look at a particular piece and you Google Chrome that particular, what the difference is it looks compared to your regular CSS.
Okay, certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah. The menu is a good example.
All right.
Okay, so for just this one piece.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's some good examples and some bad examples. And I did not build this. So, right now, C menu is the top selector. Underneath that is C menu item. Active could technically have been an ampersand because you're repeating basically what's here already. It should be nested underneath and not outside of it. Like right here, we have a mix-in for flex. Could use that. Don't need this. I'm sorry, now I'm working.
Good. We should
But yeah.
do this event more often. We work for 2 hours.
But
I would learn.
it's everybody's at different learning curves. And so we had an outside company come in and work from behind us, and they wrote normal CSS in the Sass file. And I'm like, it doesn't take that long to pick it up. If you know CSS, it doesn't really take that long to pick it up, but they didn't want to. So yeah, it kind of made things a little messy. But it's definitely helpful.
Thank you for doing that for me though. Thank you for letting me see.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad.
And if it's, see, this is what the benefit is, somebody who doesn't know Sass, well then when you're looking at somebody, I will go to the webpage and say, boy, is that cool, I wish I could do that. And then all of a sudden I get to it and I say, oh, I don't know what they're doing, but now I see having you introduce me to what Sass looks like a little bit. So thank you.
Well, good, thank you. Okay, well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.